Once Dan was discharged, Kimberly took on the role of caregiver for her disabled combat veteran husband, and she stood by him on their new battlefield. They raised 3 children together, fought off depression and PTSD, and dealt with his TBI, all while Kimberly led her own career with the Comcast Cable Corporation to support their family. Now, as the Director of Business Development with Comcast Cable, Kimberly oversees network expansion opportunities throughout the Southeast. She's also involved in the Comcast Veteran Employee Resource Group, or VetNet, because of her passion for the military and veteran community. Kimberly and Dan Bryant and their children are outstanding examples of a U.S. military veteran family that has achieved success after service together. And she joins us now to tell her story. Military Spouse of the Year, Kimberly Bryant, welcome to the Warrior Alliance Network.
Thank you so much.
No, it's great to have you. Being from Knoxville, I'm from just south of Chattanooga, so we have. I think we probably have some relatives somewhere.
Probably, we may be related. Yeah, for sure.
That's the way it works up in Northwest Georgia and East Tennessee.
Absolutely.
And it's funny because half my family are Vols fans and half my family are Dogs fans, so we always have a big old fight.
Divided.
Yeah. Is your house like that too?
No. Well, it's all Tennessee.
Okay.
My husband is from Wisconsin, so that's Badger.
Okay,
so Badger country. So there's not really. We're in different conferences. So
no, yeah. So it's not quite as hard.
It's not quite as hard.
To something a little more serious. Your family was directly impacted by 9/11. Do you have a different perspective on that these days than you did maybe then when your husband was called to deploy?
I do. So many lives were directly and indirectly impacted because of September 11th. And, a lot of people don't realize or consider the military. They think of the victims of 9/11 in the towers, but there was so much more. As I reflect on that, I think about the obvious, all those that were affected by it that were in the towers, but also for me personally, that was the last time that I saw my husband, because when he came back from his deployment, he was somebody completely different, and I've never seen that person again.
Wow. I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around that, and I admire you. I've seen this story play out a few times, having served in the military myself, and people that have experienced some, incredible injuries due to fighting that war on terror. And a dear friend of mine, Joey Jones, he's works for Fox News Channel, lost his legs. I mean, his life was totally changed. It's completely different than you, the way you experienced it, but his life changed dramatically. It's unbelievable, Scott. It really is.
It really is, and we're so glad that you're here today to talk to us about it. I guess Dan came home with those invisible wounds of war that we always talk about, and but at the time he didn't really have access to the resources that we have now. So there were a lot of challenges, to say the least, right? What would you say to encourage other families who are dealing with that process now about some of the hurdles that you faced together during his transition from military to civilian life?
As you mentioned, he did face many challenges with mental health, with his invisible wounds, such as depression, anxiety, and severe PTSD, in addition to brain injury. It was also difficult, and I think a lot of combat families can relate to this. It was also difficult for him to reconnect with family and friends because he's no longer that person. And so it was difficult for him as it was for them, because they had to grieve a loss of someone they once knew. And the person that stands before them is not that son, that brother, that husband, that friend. He also struggled with the loss of his purpose and identity. Yeah,
that's the toughest part right there. Is they lose themselves in it, and then you kind of have to, as a spouse, help them find their way back. And I really relate to you because I come from a military family, and my mother was an Army spouse. They call them dependents when you're in, and then you're out, and you're not so dependent. The roles might switch a little bit in some ways. And we were talking about that before the show. And I know you put in a lot of time supporting military spouses as well. Talk a little bit about the unique challenges that military spouses face.
Well, I would say military spouses and caregivers, in my experience, caregivers are thrown into a role that they not only did not envision doing, but have little to no experience or education on how to do that role. And how to provide the care that their injured loved one needs. Military spouses and veteran caregiving can be demanding, stressful, and extremely isolating and overwhelming. So I would say that military spouses, it's a challenge because you have your loved one who's deployed, so you're thrown into that role of now all of a sudden you're handling the finances, and you're the garbage man, and you're taking care of the lawn and the kids and all the responsibilities. And then that loved one comes home, whether they come back with an injury or not, they come back from that deployment, and then they're trying to tell you how to load the dishwasher when you've done it all this time, all by yourself. And so it can create different stressors, and that may sound silly talking about the dishwasher, but it's a real thing.
It's a bunch of those.
It's a bunch of those things. Yeah, absolutely.
All that makes sense to me.
And you got to keep the home fires burning. Literally, you're there taking care of the family and keeping the home front going, so that when they come back, there is a comfort level for them.
Absolutely.
It's difficult. There's no doubt about it. I want to go back to something you said, being a different brother, a different son, a different husband. Are there ever glimpses of what used to be, and does that make it really, really difficult or more difficult?
Ooh, and so I've got chills right now. That's a great question because, yes, there are glimpses of that person that was, and it is extremely difficult because it almost messes with your mind because you're like, oh, are they still in there? And maybe I can get them out. But it really goes back to, you have to have closure with who that person was, because they're not the same. They're never going to be the same. And learning to accept who they are now, and building that life together. I'm
not trying to compare them at all, but the only thing that I have to connect what you just shared with me was the movie, The Notebook. The very end of the Notebook, James Garner, the character, and his wife, she has dementia or Alzheimer's, and there's that moment when she's there and they're talking and everything's normal, and then he's like, please don't go, because she's slipping back into that Alzheimer's or dementia or whatever it does, and he just breaks down in tears. Mm-hmm. That's what you said makes me think of.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's for different reasons, but it's the same.
Eyes water. It puts a lump in my throat.
Yeah.
But you stuck by him, and that's what's really impressive, is that you decided you were going to take this on and make it work, and really you didn't even have children at that point, right? He came back, and then you started your family, and you stayed with him. I did.
We did have children. I had 2 children by my previous marriage. Uh-huh. We have 3 together.
I see. Wow.
So yeah, there were 2 children in the picture that were directly impacted as well, because they are the only ones out of all 5 of the children that knew him before.
Wow.
Now the 3 that we had together only know him and knew him after injuries.
Wow. Just the story is so compelling, heart-wrenching, encouraging. I don't know how it can be all of them at the same time, but it is.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, but as a guy that's just sitting here and knowing the sacrifices and knowing what you've done and how you've done it and with the dignity you've done it with, I have a hard time wrapping my head around, and I know you do too, but as an outsider looking in, going, how?
Yeah.
Just how. And then I would ask the same question, like, what made you decide to tell other people about it?
Well, I chose to, for many years, I suffered in silence for fear of judgment. I was not in a military community. I was in the civilian world, so I was not surrounded by anyone that would, get it. And so I just kept it to myself. But then I met someone at the VA, and it was a military spouse, and she was sharing some of the struggles that she was having, and something just deep inside of me, I can't even explain it. It was like this still small voice, really. Something just clicked and was like, you can help people with what you're going through and continue to go through. And so, I felt like I was completely alone in all that I was going through, and I realized that I wasn't. And I realized that there were people just like me that felt invisible and alone, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And so that's what compelled me to want to start sharing publicly, was to be that advocate and asset to other military spouses, caregivers, mothers that were in a similar situation.
You're listening to Success After Service. Our guest is Kimberly Bryant. She's the Director of Business Development with Comcast Cable Corporation. You can find them at Comcast VetNet on X or Twitter. That's what most people call them. Corporate.comcast.com is their website. And, of course, you can always find her story and her information at thewarrioralliance.org. So you work at Comcast, as I mentioned, Director of Business Development, and involved with the Comcast Veteran Employee Resource Group. VetNet, as it's called. What's the mission? How do you promote veteran culture at Comcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So VetNet, which is our veterans network, is an employee resource group that is open to everyone. So you do not need to have any prior service or military connection whatsoever. But it really embraces our veteran employees, their spouses, family members, and supporters who encourage and support one another through shared experiences, volunteering, advocacy, career development, outward engagement, and professional growth and retention. One thing I would like to call out about Comcast in general is that Comcast's commitment to military engagement is really deeply rooted in our culture, going back to decades. With our founder, who was Ralph Roberts. He was a United States Navy veteran. So at Comcast, we're invested in the long-term growth and success of our military-connected teammates. And our focus areas include hiring members of our military and veteran communities, professional development, and a range of benefits and programs for our military-connected employees.
Wow. Comcast really has it going on for the veterans there. So basically you're creating a cultural center for veterans and supporters of veterans who want to get together and focus on veterans issues within the company, and also to create a little outreach perhaps, and kind of in honor of the founder.
Absolutely.
That's great. Now, because of your work there and the fact that you have a career and you're also raising children and taking care of your husband, you were named the Warrior Alliance Military Spouse of the Year at the Veteran Impact Awards. And I got to tell you, for me, that was the highlight of the night. It was just amazing to see you come out there, because you really represented so many spouses that are sort of underappreciated, in my estimation. And I really appreciated what you said. I want to know what that award means to you and your family. But first, do you remember what you said when you received that award?
I do. I think out of all the recipients in the different categories, I said the fewest words.
Yeah, you said one line, and then there was not a dry eye in the house, and you got a standing ovation.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I said, "Not all who serve wear a uniform,"
and it's so true.
Amen to that.
And
absolutely.
Thank you for serving our country.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what does it mean to you and your family when you brought that award home? What did the kids say? What does Dan say?
Well, so funny story. Dan was there, and I was told when I was going to receive the award not to tell anybody. Like, you can tell your household, but don't tell anybody because we don't want it to get out. Well, I told no one. I didn't even tell him. So he didn't even know I was getting the award until he saw me on the stage, and it was till the video started. So that was fun and a surprise for him. But it really meant a lot because it was really symbolic. You know, I don't do what I do for an award.
Of course not. Yeah.
But it was very symbolic and meaningful to me and to our family because I have been vulnerable over the years and sharing my story and the trauma, really, and in order to help other people and to be recognized for that just really solidifies that I'm on the right path in helping others.
Did you cry?
I did not cry.
I did.
I gotta tell you, because he said there's not a dry in the room, and the fact that you didn't, again, just goes back to the incredible ability you have to withstand what most people can't.
Now, I do want to add, I did not cry then, but that does not mean I have not cried.
Oh, yeah, no, of course. Those two very different things.
And I have been, I mean, you hear about people, you know, the silent struggles, the people facing battles you have no idea. And that really describes me. I am the type that is behind closed doors and, you know, would cry and then suck it up, put on my happy face. And because I don't want anyone else to feel burdened, you know, by what I'm going through. But I have since evolved and I've healed, and so it's a matter of taking all that hurt and helping others heal.
Where does the award live in your house now, and what do the kids say about it?
So the kids aren't really as phased.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, they think the award itself is cool. They don't think I'm cool because it is a pretty cool award. Like, it's heavy and but it now sits in my office at work.
Okay.
Because I'm there and it's more visible to me, and it's there intentionally as a reminder to me.
And you do work so hard, and like we said, you're not only a military spouse and a mother and a caregiver to Dan, but you're also a business professional with Comcast. So I bet you got some great advice about juggling all of that, those multiple roles. You got any advice for military spouses that are listening to this show that might have similar circumstances?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, you know, I want to stay consistent with my theme of few words, and I will say my advice is one word.
Uh-oh.
Ready?
Yeah.
Pray.
Self-care.
Self-care.
I think prayer is part of that.
Prayer would be a part of that.
Yeah, prayer is part of that. And so I'll elaborate. So I'll break my one word here and expound upon that.
We appreciate it.
You're welcome. So self-care. It's, you can not pour from an empty tank. And it's just like that, the saying about the oxygen mask, right? You have to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can help anyone else. And so what does that look like? That's taking care of yourself mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Mm-hmm. Investing that time in you so that you can have gas in the tank to pour into others.
I mean, it's amazing.
I want to follow up on that a little bit.
Love that.
Back to prayer. Were you praying for Dan when he was over there?
Yes, I was praying for Dan. I was praying for others.
Absolutely.
I was praying for myself, us, you know, everyone.
And has the thought, I bet it has the thought ever crossed your mind, you know, the other guys, they all lost their lives and he didn't. And usually that means that God has a plan for that person. Has that come into your thought process in your prayer life?
Yes, and out loud in arguments. I don't know if you call them arguments, but they're, you know, we've been through it, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, this man became a zombie. He would not get out of bed. I would have to come home from work. I didn't have to. I chose to come home from work, physically make him go to the bathroom. Like, you know, he was literally had lost just his will to live. And so I remember shouting at one point, like, you are still here for a reason, and you are wasting it. Don't waste it.
So many people, you could say that about so many people.
So many people.
That have opportunity in front of them and don't capitalize on it.
Absolutely.
And waste it. Again, it's unbelievable. This story's unbelievable. I really feel like there's so much more. I mean, and we're coming up on, like, you know, the last few minutes that we have here with you, and I feel like we've just barely broken the ice of what you have to offer and what you have to say.
Well, maybe there's something you could tell spouses of veterans that have come back, and maybe they haven't fully identified PTSD, or maybe they have a depression issue. What are some early warning signs where you would say, you know, go ahead and have that talk and maybe get a hold of the Warrior Alliance?
Yeah, I would say Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. So if you're experiencing those types of behaviors from your loved one, lots of moodiness, unexpected moods that really don't make sense, if you're experiencing confusion yourself, I would say reach out.
That's great advice. Yeah. Does Dan have advice for people?
Dan does have advice for people. You know, I think so many veterans who suffer and go through what he's went through, their marriages don't make it. And trust me, I am no saint. I'm not perfect. I'm hateful. I'm condescending. I'm sarcastic. Right?
All of us are.
So by no means do I want any of this to portray that, oh, I'm just so great. But we've been through it, and we're still here. But there were times where I wanted to run for the hills. I almost did run for the hills. So I would say that his advice, that he has said this before, is, you know, lean on your supports, those people that are there, whether it's your spouse or, you know, whoever is in your circle, but also don't be too proud to ask for help.
Gosh, it's so true.
And if you're listening to this out there and you think you might relate to this in any way, please go to thewarrioralliance.org right now and check out how you can get in touch. And they have all kinds of resources to help you find your way through this process. You're not alone.
Kimberly Bryant, Director of Business Development, Comcast Cable Corporation. You can find them at Comcast VNet on Twitter or Instagram. Are you on Instagram too, or is it just Twitter? Probably, I bet it's both.
Yeah, it's both.
Yeah, but it's at Comcast VetNet, corporate.comcast.com, warrioralliance.org. What are y'all into nowadays? I mean, since you've, not that the easy days are ahead, but maybe some easier days. Like, what keeps you entertained? What do you like to do with the family?
Well, so we are a big sports family. You know, I mentioned we have 5 kids. So I have Alex, who's 30, Madison, who's 29, Kaylee, who's 20, and identical twin boys, Braxton and Brody, who are 13.
Okay.
So still at home. I have 2.5 because Kaylee's in college, so the other 2 are grown and flown, but the twins are heavily involved in sports. Yeah, and so we're constantly at their sports. We actually have a football game tonight, but Dan and I also, I've been an athlete my whole life, and so I love to play softball, and but we're in a cornhole league and a pickleball league.
Oh
together.
my gosh, it sounds like me and my wife. We're in all of those too. Yeah. Now she has stopped playing co-ed softball with me, but we still play pickleball and we still play cornhole in the same league.
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds so familiar. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come in to share a story that is extraordinary, and I think so many people relate to it and can relate to it and will relate to it. And I hope this is just another platform for people to hear the good news of what can be out of a really, really tough situation.
And we want to thank Dan for his service to our country, and we want to thank you and your children for your service to our country.
God bless you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.